Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Had a great episode with Stuart Oberman last week. Got a lot of good feedback and comments on that. Associates popped up. I got some questions on associates this week that was good. I figured maybe we'll touch on that a little bit more. I think one of the things you said is you got an email with some questions. So I want to kind of touch on that a little bit, and let's just jump right in.
Yeah, we had a doctor listen to the podcast, sent me an email, which is great, by the way. If you have things that you want us to talk about on the podcast, send it, Matthew@towerleadership.com, info@towerleadership.com. Let us know, because we're going to plug it in here and discuss it. I mean, we're here to make this podcast for you, so anything we can do to make it beneficial, let us know. So we had a doctor listen to the podcast. He's in the process of getting associates in his practice, okay? So his CPA was telling him that it might be best to keep them at 1099. So his overall question was, what is, the advantages, pros and cons of 1099 versus W-2?
Well, here's this whole idea back again of don't let the tax tail wag the dog. And so what ends up happening is, what's the number one problem with associates? What's the number one difficult thing?
They don't feel like they have a voice in the practice.
Well, I mean, keeping them, right?
Yeah,
ultimately, it's keeping them, right? How do
leaving.
we keep them, right? We got, I've argued for years that the reason associates that won't stay in a dental practice is because these are educated, competitive, right, highly talented people, and you tell them, just shut up and do the work, and you don't get any say in leadership or anything else in the practice. Well, that's not going to work out long term, by the way. These are talented people who are ultra intelligent that you're not using that skill set. The second of all is you try to figure out how to pay them as least as possible and get away with paying them as least as possible. In fact, you go to seek advisors who will show you how to pay them as least as possible. So if you take a highly talented person, and I don't care if it's a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, you take a person and you figure out how to give them zero leadership abilities, zero say in the practice, and pay them as little as possible, and then you wonder why they leave. Yep. Of course they're going to leave. I mean, that's just the way it's been done is ridiculous. Or the other side is, well, since I can't manage them, I'll just give away half the practice, right? I mean, so that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Not, and so
or they end up handicapping the doctor. I mean, I'm producing this much now, and you're paying me $10.99. Well, I want this much equity, otherwise I'm leaving, and you're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place.
That's right. And so now all of a sudden, and by the way, people hire associates at the wrong time too, because they don't understand that the reason you hire an associate is because of the fact that you can't meet demand. Mm-hmm. You hire an associate to increase capacity, right, of the practice, and therefore your income doesn't go down. If you increase it to a certain extent, then you get to pull back your days and then eventually pull yourself out of a dental chair if that's what you want to do. And work on the business, or do a combination of personal and the business. But we go back down to this W-2 and 1099 conversation. I'm asked this quite often, and here's what I would tell you: is this goes back to a CPA is not a business person. They didn't go to business school. Yep. They don't understand. This is not what they went to school for. They went to school for taxes and expenses. And so when you ask a tax accountant about taxes and expenses, they're going to tell you how to reduce expenses and reduce taxes. Mm-hmm. So if you ask a surgeon if you should do surgery, they're going to tell you yes. That's why I won't see an orthopedist.
Right.
And it's the second reason. Well, ask a lawyer if you should sue, right? Ask a banker if you should take out a loan. This is predictable. You went and asked a person who looked at taxes and expenses what you should do, and of course they said, pay them $10.99.
Yeah.
Now here's the question. Does that tax accountant focus on what effect does that have on your revenues long term if you have to replace an associate every 2 years? Do they study that?
They're looking at the books.
Do they study human resource management and ultimately look at how that affects leadership? Are they looking at
growth of the
leadership?
practice.
Right? Are they looking at anything else besides the flipping expense? Mm-hmm. No, they're not looking actually at a business standpoint and saying, wait, listen, one of the greatest things we want in business, so you can write this down, it's called continuity of business. We want continuity. We want the business to, in other words, not become interrupted. Yeah. When you think about that, right, and the idea of non-interruption, look, when you lose one of your key revenue drivers, I would call that an interruption in your business, right? And so we look at a business, and one of the things I've always preached is like, if a business is going to be scalable, you've got to keep your top talent, right?
Yeah.
You got to make sure top talent wants to stay there. This is a place that they want to be long-term for their careers. Mm-hmm. And dentists have never, ever done that. They've never spent time to really, truly, in fact, most of the consulting around this is garbage, and I don't have any problem saying that. And look, it's either driven by a bunch of people who are trying to get you to sell your practice. So the transition specialist is trying to get you to sell your practice. So they're saying, yeah, sell off half of it. You got people down in Texas telling you sell it off at a third and a third and a third to your associates. Yep. You've got people who have a bias around that, and they've got a reason to tell you to sell off your practice. There's also another side of this is you're asking your tax CPAs. This is my biggest problem. The tax CPAs are not the person you ask business advice around. Yeah. Stop asking your tax CPA business questions. Mm-hmm. Ask them tax questions, right?
How would this affect my taxes?
How does this affect my taxes?
Yeah.
Hey, if I do this, what is my taxes? But then you have to go back to the business professional and say, okay, if I 1099 them, which is where this email, by the way, this is a very sharp doctor. I know who this came from. And so this is a doctor who's a great leader within his practice. This is somebody who gets things done. And this is someone who is, intelligent enough to say, that was the tax accountant's perspective. What is the business perspective? Yeah. Which is why the email was sent to begin with. Mm-hmm. So giving this doctor credit.
And he's a larger practice too. So it just shows me that the marketplace, this is what's happening. A lot of doctors are going to their CPAs and asking them this very question. And that's why we see this, I guess, hiccup in the dental industry of keeping entertaining associates. It's because they're all going to their accountant and asking, all right, I'm bringing this guy in, so should I give him a percentage of the practice? How should I pay this person? Well, first try to get as low as possible, and then we're going to 1099 him so he doesn't get any benefits, doesn't get anything at all.
That's right.
And we're just going to work him to death and then hope he produces immediately $100,000 a month. Like,
yeah, and
here you go, have fun.
I don't know why they left, right? It's the most absurd thing in the world. So this is a doctor who wants to have continuity of business. They want to have the business continue uninterrupted. Matter of fact, the reason why people sell practices is because there continues to be an interruption in the business, and the hygienist quit and the doctor quit, and they're like, oh, hell with it. I just want out because I don't want to deal with this anymore. So there's a book written called Built to Last, right? We want a company that's built to last. We want people to be there long term, right? Unless you're just bringing tons of associates in, you need people there long term. So W-2, okay, making someone feel like they're part of the organization. I will tell you, I've looked at tens of thousands of business financials, and I will tell you, I have never had, whether it be W-2 or 1099, I have never had either way affect the overall financial profitability of the business, ever. I've never had somebody going back and going, well, you'd be profitable if you didn't W-2 them. Like that's never, ever, ever happened, by the way, in the tens of thousands of case studies. I've never seen somebody come back and be like, wow.
That broke my bank.
That broke the bank account, W-2 in them. Man, you would have really done well if you didn't W-2 them. Yeah. That's never happened, okay? That is not going to make that much of a difference. I'm telling you, if that's where those peanuts are where your problem is, we got a lot of other problems to focus on first, by the way. And then second of all is, I want someone to feel like they're part of my team. Yeah. Like someone's a 1099, they're an independent contractor. They don't work for my business. Yeah. They're not entitled to the benefits of my business. Mm-hmm. I can't give them the benefits of my plans. I can't include them in my, if I'm doing any time retirement plans. This is a person who is not part of my business.
There's no reason for them to keep coming to you.
So ultimately I'm treating them just like the painter. I'm treating them just like somebody who's transactional. And there's a difference in business between transactional and relational. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, if you want a transactional business, you're going to get a transactional team member. So what ends up happening is all of a sudden this team member says, well, this is all transactional. I'll just go find someone who can give me more money. Or, because this is a transactional relationship anyhow. I'm not even part of this team, really. I'm an independent contractor. There is a mental state when someone says, I don't work for you. Yeah. I'm technically an independent contractor. I have a contract with you as an independent contractor, but I don't really work for you. I'm not part of your company. I'm an independent contractor.
Following your core values.
Right. Your core values, your leadership, your organizational chart, all the things you're trying to create within a business to create continuity and flow and all that stuff. I don't need to listen to any of that really, because I'm just an independent contractor. Because you let the tax accountant tell you that 1099 in them made all the sense in the world. Yes, you can reduce some expenses by doing it that way. Here's the problem. You will gain revenue by, first of all, having continuity of business. What's it going to cost you when that associate leaves? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars is it going to cost you when the associate leaves? Now, have the tax accountant come back and talk to you about that. Is the hundreds of thousands of dollars you're going to lose. How about the stress of leadership and basically having a person who doesn't feel like they're part of your organization and then therefore isn't part of your leadership team, isn't part of the overall growth of the business? Look, I mean, how do you quantify that? See, these are the things what ends up happening, and this is why I say that I've never seen it affect financials negatively, is because the fact that these people feel like they're not more part of the business. They're actually part of the team. They're actually committed to this business. Yes. And you're not, by the way, it's not that much. By the way, 1099 and W-2, it's not saving you that much more money, by the way. No. Okay? It's not.
And that's what he was, he put in there in the email that, his accountant was saying, he wanted to protect his interests, but he also understands the tax benefits for the associate being 1099 instead of W-2.
But here's what ends up happening. If you actually go back, if the W-2 person has, first of all, let's play that out for him. What benefits? What's he going to write off?
He doesn't have an office.
Doesn't have an office write off.
A white coat.
Car. I mean,
that's it. Yeah. Mileage.
By the way, if you have expenses, even as a W-2 employee, that are not covered by, right, you'll see it. That you can actually go back and say these are expenses I had to have for my business. But let's play that out for a moment there. By the way, the IRS lets you do that, and so let's play that out for a minute. Though, what expenses are you talking about? Well, he gets the tax advantages. What tax advantages? Yes, he can expense things. Or she can expense things. Expense what? Right?
What do you?
So you start to go through. Expense CE. Technically speaking, if that you can still expense CE. I'm not going to get into all the conversation on taxes today because this isn't a tax conversation, but what ends up happening is to say, and by the way, if I was somebody, I would look at maybe CE being something as a benefit I offer to my associates.
I'll pay for your CE.
Instead of, here's the crazy part is people will go, I'm not paying for CE. That's ridiculous. Look, you're spending it anyhow. Look, why don't you retain someone long term? So there's so many things we could be doing. And like I said,
and I think one of the biggest things that the accountant is probably focusing on is because he only sees it as two paths. It's you either do 1099, so you don't have to give up equity, but if you make them W-2, you have to give up equity. Like, if they're W-2, then you're giving up equity. And I think that's one of the things that, he was touching on was in order to not give up equity, it would help if they were 1099.
W-2 has nothing to do with equity.
Well, as we've seen in the marketplace, a lot of doctors think the only way to bring on an associate is say, hey, you'll get 10% of my practice or 50% of my practice, whereas there's other avenues you can do to get them to stay long term. So I think he was just thinking in a lens of 1099 protects your interests. W-2 means you're going to have to give up equity.
That's not true. That's not true at all. I that's like me, I guess, saying, Matthew, you're my 1099 team member, and I'm going to pay you as a marketing director as a 1099, and so you could write off some of your suits or something.
Doesn't make a whole lot.
And then I'm going to call you up on a Tuesday, and I'm going to say, hey, look, I need your help on something. It's after hours, and it's Tuesday at 8 o'clock at night, and I call you up and I say, hey, I really need to do this, and you're like, F off, like it's 8 o'clock at night on a Tuesday.
I'll send over the contract work.
Look at my contract. My contract
it's gonna be 4 hours.
No, I saw somebody, like, literally, this just recently happened with the doctor, was like, I'm not going to this next location because this next location, my contract doesn't need to say I work at this other location. Yeah, because they're an independent contractor, and as an independent contractor,
they can do it. They can say what they want.
They're like, I'm just in a contract with you. I'm not your team member. I'm not. You don't own.
You just take it out like you said. It's like a painter. Like you trying to tell your painter that he has to go to this location and paint the house because he did your last house. No, he's an independent contractor. He's like, no,
I'm not going to do that. And you're like, but why won't the associate listen to me?
Yeah.
Why? Because you let your tax accountant tell you how to hire people. There is not one business school in the entire world that would tell you to allow your tax accountant to tell you how to hire people. Zero, zilch, none. And I guarantee you in accounting school, nobody talks about hiring people. That's not what you do in accounting
They're talking about the percentage of your payroll that it should be, but that's about it.
This is now they'll talk about payroll as an expense, right? And they'll tell cost accounting. They'll talk about allocating payroll to jobs, but not about the process of hiring and retaining people. That's not what an accountant does. And so this is not beating up on accountants. By the way, I always say you need a great accountant. You need a great tax CPA. This is not beating up on anyone, but it's to say is that go to the functional area that someone controls. Why do I get passionate about this subject? Because in no other industry does this really happen to this extent. Most businesses go get business advice from business professionals. In dentistry, the cheapest thing to do is to go to your tax CPA so you don't have to pay for advice, but you don't realize it's probably costing you over your career millions and millions of dollars by keep going to your CPA and asking business advice. I'm telling you flat out that if you tell somebody they're transactional in nature, they're going to act transactional. There is a mental state that happens with a transactional team member versus a employee versus someone who feels like they're part of the organization, someone who you've committed to long term, somebody you give benefits as an employee, somebody you make part of the team, someone who's part of your leadership team, somebody who feels like they have a home here. That person feels better. They feel different. And I'm telling you right now that there are so many advantages. If they want to be able to write some things off, there are a lot of ways to do that. Okay, there's a lot of ways to be able to write other expenses off.
I couldn't imagine it being a ton of money to where you'd be like, oh, that's why I need to be 1099.
And if you're, and I'm serious about that statement, if the difference between hiring an associate W-2 1099 is going to cost that much cash flow problems, then you have some other issues to deal with way before you deal with this issue, because you've got cash flow problems. And you have cash flow problems, which means your business is broken and it needs a lot of help. So maybe this might not even be the time to hire an associate. The truth is, if you're building a scalable business, you want to have people committed to the organization. I get it, but it's what ends up happening is when you cut. This is the whole idea of this whole idea of always in business. You can't cut your way to profitability. This is exactly it. You can't cut your way to profitability. Hiring someone 1099 is not going to make you more profitable. It won't make you more profitable, and the reason why it will not make you more profitable is because the associate will do more and commit more when they're a W-2 employee, which means revenues will increase. See, there's two ways to look at this: decrease expenses, and increase revenues. So what ends up happening is when someone's committed to an organization, then revenues increase. So what ends up happening is that's why you can't cut your way. The reason why you can't cut your way to profitability is because it does not take into account qualitative factors, i.e. hygienist quitting, i.e. front desk quitting, i.e. dentist quitting. And so it doesn't take into those things into account. That's why you can't cut your way to profitability. So when you're talking about somebody saying cut this, it's the same stupid, I say stupid because it's stupid advice, who says go buy a bunch of stuff you don't need at the end of the year and so that you can reduce your taxes. If someone tells you that, fire them right now. It's bad advice. It's because now if you've got plenty of cash, maybe if we need the equipment, maybe. But we don't take on expenses that we don't need to take on, because why? You might say, well, my accountant tells me to do that. I don't want to fire them. Listen, because there is something called opportunity cost, and that money could have a huge return. But if you spend $100,000 to save 30, and you've just given up a gigantic opportunity cost. So when someone tells you to spend $100,000 to save 30, you got to question that advice.
And I think he hit the nail on the head, because what he was thinking was, he said, I think that being able to offer retirement insurance, etc., would be very attractive from their viewpoint. I understand this will cost me more money as I have to pay more taxes, pay insurance, and match 401k contributions. So he's looking at it from, and we always say, what if I invest in my team members and they leave? Well, what if I don't invest and they stay? Same concept there. So he's got the right idea of thinking, well, I'm going to make him long-term. I want to take care of him. I want to give him insurance. I want to do 401k, all these things, because that's going to attract, because you're not going to have to replace that person over time. What that looks like is an associate that's with you that you can count on, that's part of the team for the next 10 years, rather than you having to find contractors every freaking 6 months. And that's no way to run a dental practice for sure.
I think that what a brilliant, beautiful statement. Read that again for me.
I think that being able to offer retirement, insurance, etc. would be very attractive from their viewpoint.
Stop it there. Beautiful. Yes, it's attractive from their viewpoint. Now, there's other ways to add compensation, and I've actually spoken to this doctor about that. But I want you to stop there and just go, yes, treat them like a team member. I think offering benefits to somebody is very advantageous. Mm-hmm. I think paying somebody what they're worth is advantageous. I think ultimately treating them as part of the leadership and being a leader in the practice is advantageous. Look, if you think about how many doctors come into practices and leave within 24 months, it's I don't have stats on that, but I guarantee you it's staggering.
Yeah.
Why? Because the same poor advice has circulated within the industry for the past ever,
mm-hmm.
which is either sell your practice or treat an associate like crap.
And that's why we get conversations about it all the time, because they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and so you listen to the Denwell podcast. That's what you do.
Yes.
So look, I mean, now there's people listening to this. They're gonna go, no, I pay them $10.99, and I'm. Okay, look, you can be stubborn about it if you want to. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I'm not, do what you want to do. I'm just telling you flat out, no, we treat them, we 1099 them, well, we treat them great. I know what you're saying. I'm telling you flat out that mentally when someone's a 1099, if I was a 1099, if you hired me as a 1099, I'm going to be like, I don't work for you. I mean, not technically. I mean, I have a contract with you. You're going to have a hard time getting over that hump.
Yeah.
And so that person feels very transactional. If you're willing to bring them on, don't you want to keep them long term?
Yeah.
Look, they'll make you. This is what the other thing people don't realize too is associates make you a lot of money if done well. So give them some of it. Like it's okay. Like don't feel like this person got over on you just because of the fact that they got some benefits.
They're more than likely increasing your asset too.
If you look at great organizations, like. Can you imagine what top organizations pay their C-suite and what taxes they pay on their C-suite? And imagine them saying, well, we're just going to 1099 because we don't want to actually pay these people any money. What?
Yeah.
Like, it would never happen. Okay?
Company would crumble.
Yeah, because what ends up happening is to attract and retain top talent, you have to take care of top talent. And I guarantee you Apple, when they go get their C-suite, doesn't ask the tax CPA,
should we 1099
should we 1099 them? That guarantee you conversation never happens, okay? Because it's absurd. Yeah. And so what ends up happening is when we go to look at professional organizations, and you are a professional organization, by the way. Professional organizations should pay people what they're worth, should take care of them, should invite them to the conversation. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm an advocate of that. And yes, I think what you need to look at your organization and say, does this person truly feel like they're part of my organization, or are they a 1099 independent contractor? Are they part of the vision, the direction? Have they bought in? Do they know where we're going? Are they part of the benefits? Or do I tell them, hey, we're having a healthcare conversation. You don't need to show up today because you're not eligible for the plan. What is it that, you got to start thinking about these things and start to say, someone says to them, oh, you'll save tons of money, or you'll save tons of money on taxes. No, you won't. I guarantee you, because what ends up happening is you're going to give up a lot of revenue, and you're going to get a lot of revenue because that person is committed to the practice and the direction of the practice. It's hard to quantify that. That's the hard part between art and science of a business.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things that Stuart said last week was you have to have your advisors in place. So when you do have these questions, you can ask your advisors, because your CPA is going to tell you one thing because he's looking at it from a tax and expense perspective. And then you have someone like us that's going to say, well, how's it going to grow your business? How's it going to affect that?
Yeah.
So you have to have your advisors in place to ask those questions.
What a great statement. I think that's a great statement, Matthew, which is have your advisors in place. Like, no, look, don't just take the CPA. Now you might listen to me and you might say, look, I hear what Eric says. I'm just going to do it anyhow. And then you can call me up when you're trying to figure out how to replace your associate in 2 years. And just make sure you have the staffing company really close, okay? But yeah, I mean, have your advisors close, and so that you can pick up the phone and make a phone call. And so that's why, we look at questions like this. This is a very pointed question. I thought it was very well asked, which is, yes, I know what my tax CPA says, but I'm trying to keep people long term, and I'm trying to take care of people, and I know that if I do that, I'll win anyhow.
Yeah.
Quit being greedy. Look, there's support, grow the business and support the business. You'll make plenty of money. You'll be fine. You'll take care of everything you want to take care of, but you can also take care of other people too. And so, and you don't have to give up half your practice to do so. This is the other thing. Look, giving up half your practice just to give up half your practice is a cop out.
Yeah.
It really is. And
if you think it's going to reduce your time right away, if you're doing it because you're like, oh, as soon as I bring this guy in, I'm going to take a step back.
That's not how it works.
Not how life works.
This is how people go, I brought associated. It didn't work at all. It was you. It was you.
Yeah. And your practice was doing 600,000 and you brought an associate.
I should say it's you. It's often you. Yeah. It's not always you. But here's the thing. And by the way, on this podcast, I use pretty blunt language. Like I do. I know that. Because I know what I'm talking about, and I'm confident about that, and I have the capabilities to be able to help you. And so, I always tell people, like, people don't pay me to be nice; they pay me to tell them what they need to know. Yep. And I think I'm a nice guy, though. I would say so. I think I'm a nice guy, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you the blunt truth. And so, I have a dental wealth podcast, but beat around the bush. No, I'm not going to beat around the bush. This is a dental wealth podcast. Look, I'm trying to tell you is that if you want to create a business that's built to last, then you need to take care of people. Quit asking your tax CPA what business decision. Ask them tax decisions, and then take that to account and say, okay, well, this tax CPA wants me to give up $70,000 of cash. What should I do? What are my other options for that? Go back to the business person and say, what are my other options with this cash? Mm-hmm. Like, could I do other things with it? What would be the return? Yeah. And so, because I don't know if that's the best place to put it. Yeah. And so we start having different conversations, and maybe we do buy a bunch of stuff at the end of the year in advance, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe we prepay some things, but maybe the things that they're telling you to prepay are wrong. Maybe there's things that have much greater return that the tax CPA doesn't know how to tell you those things. They don't. They know how to tell you to buy equipment you don't need. That's what they don't know. And I'm not trying to beat anyone. This is not the beat up CPA podcast. This is just being blunt and honest because I get passionate about the subject because it's led so many people astray. It's to say, well, where else could I put it? Now, great tax CPAs would say, hey, look, let's bring the business guy in here too and have a conversation about where else to place. Or would say, go back and talk to your business advisor and ask them where else you could put this money, and then let's talk about it all together and make some decisions about where's the best place to do it to also reduce your taxes and make some investments. So it's not either or. It's both. Yeah. It's basically, as Stuart said last week, have your advisors around, have them ready, and then be able to bring them together and have counsel. And then basically you as a CEO make the decisions based on that. But based on the simple conversation, I would tell you, my preference is W-2. That's my preference. I took 27 minutes to say that.
Fast forward all the way through W-2.
Now you can get your CE credit.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy. Look, send the questions in. Matthew's right. Look, send the questions in. Make sure you're putting those questions up. And look, if you've got some, we can have this could be like the Bryson DeChambeau versus
Brooks
Koepka knockout. Like if you hear a podcast like this and you want to push back, send a question. I'll be more than happy to answer it. I mean, send things in. Don't just sit in your circle and stomp your feet. Send a question in. Send a challenge. I'll be more than happy to talk about anything you want to talk about. And and if you've been told something else, then let's talk through it. So send your questions, and where can they send them in?
You can send it into the info@towerleadership.com or just straight to me, Matthew@towerleadership.com. Matthew with 2 T's.
Matthew with 2 T's.
It's 2 T's.
It's not Matt who.
It's not Matt who.
All right. You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.